Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here to join the SCB DeFi webinar. My name is Kelvin Koh, and I'm one of the co-founders of Spartan Group. Spartan Group is a team of crypto specialists. We started in the crypto space back in 2017, and prior to that, my founders and I spent most of our careers in traditional finance. Specifically, I spent 18 years in Goldman, running the research division in Goldman and ultimately becoming a partner there, and subsequently spending a couple of years in a US-based hedge fund before founding Spartan Group with my co-founders. Just a quick introduction on Spartan Group and what we do. We primarily have several businesses. So firstly, we have our advisory business, which focuses on three things. Number one, capital markets, which is essentially helping crypto startups to fundraise. And secondly, we also have an M&A business, which we started about a year ago. And we were fortunate to be involved in several important deals, including a sale of the Deribit founders' stake to a global consortium of investors. And more recently, we also advised Blockfolio in its sale to FTX. And then lastly, we also have our consulting business, where we have been working with IBM for almost 2 years, helping IBM to form partnerships within the crypto space and also penetrate the space. And then secondly, we have our asset management business, which effectively consists of two parts. The first is Spartan Capital SBC, which is the entity that manages all of our liquid strategies. And currently we have a hedge fund strategy that is based on the fundamental approach to investing and is mostly invested across the entire crypto stack with an emphasis on the liquid markets. And then secondly, we just recently set up Spartan Venture Fund LP, which is focused on early stage opportunities. And we are currently in the process of launching our first venture fund, which is going to be focused on making DeFi investments. And last but not least, we also have a trading business where we help to facilitate the sale and exchange of tokens for some of our corporate clients. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. Fortunately for us, we were very early investors in the DeFi space and are passionate about what we're seeing evolving in the space. I think the speakers earlier today have talked about how the DeFi space is evolving, but the way that we analyze the space is that we believe that DeFi is eventually going to disrupt traditional finance in a pretty significant manner. So if you look at how traditional finance has evolved over the past 100 years, you would recognize many of these names in this chart. Companies like Bank of America, JP Morgan, Visa, including my former employer, Goldman Sachs. And obviously, currently, traditional finance companies still dominate the global financial sector, but you can also see that from the changes in regulation, as well as the more recent disruption from fintech companies, that traditional finance is going through a pretty tough period where the businesses no longer have growth opportunities and are starting to get disrupted by what I call Finance 2.0, which is the 100 or so fintech startups that we have seen sprout up over the last 10, 15 years. And if you compare the market caps of these fintech startups, I mean, they have grown very rapidly and very tremendously in the last 15 or so years. But they're still a fraction of the market cap that we see in traditional finance. And this market cap I'm referring to just looks at the top 10 players in these respective sectors. But that is a pretty good, that gives us a pretty good sense of the difference in the relative sizes of these emerging subsectors. And then on the other hand, we're now seeing the emergence of decentralized finance. And you can see some of the familiar names here like Aave, Compound, Uniswap Maker, and Kyber. And clearly, we are still in the very early stages of decentralized finance, with only about 1 million users currently interacting with these protocols. And clearly, from a market cap standpoint, while we have seen a rally in these assets over the last few months, we are still in the very early stages of the evolution of decentralized finance, right? So if you think about how decentralized finance is going to evolve over the next 10, 15 years, you can simply look at how fintech has evolved and how these market caps could eventually become quite significant. Now, obviously, we're still in the early days, so there is a lot to play for, and there are many startups in the space that are innovating, and so it's a pretty open field at the moment. But I think we will see some giants emerging over the next 10 or so years. And as we think about DeFi today, it has effectively become a global movement, right? And this is just a representation of the Ethereum ecosystem, and already you can see that it spans across all the different industries, including payments, including custody services, marketplaces, exchanges, insurance, credit, and so on. And new ideas, keep sprouting. And beyond Ethereum, obviously, we're starting to see the birth of various ecosystems in networks like Polkadot, Cosmos, and most recently also Avalanche and Solana, right? So the space is growing very rapidly, and there are lots of opportunities that currently present themselves. Now, if we look at the Asian DeFi landscape, I think many of us would be tempted to think that a lot of this innovation is in the US. And indeed, we have seen many good projects coming out of the US, but I would say increasingly, we're starting to see innovators stepping forward in Asia. So you can see that within Greater China, there's more than a dozen projects, some of which you may recognize already. And then outside of Greater China, in places like Korea, Singapore, for instance, Australia, there are also many DeFi startups that have sprouted over the last 2 to 3 years. And I'm sure this is not the exhaustive list. This is, what we have managed to put together, just combing through the top 100 projects, as well as some of the startups that we've been interacting with recently. So it's probably maybe only half or a third of the full list. But you can get a sense of the geographic spread of these projects, as well as the different types of areas that they're focusing on, and it's pretty evenly spread out across the different subsectors. And so for us, as I mentioned earlier, we have been quite early in DeFi. We started investing in DeFi about 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago. And some of the earlier bets that we made have obviously emerged as leaders within the respective verticals, and also the returns that we've been able to generate from these investments have been quite attractive, right? So some of these names you'll be familiar with, things like Chainlink, MakerDAO, Band Protocol, Synthetics, Aave, Wyan, and so on. These have become largely household names. And next, I'm going to go through some of these investments in a bit more detail, just to give you a sense of how we identify these opportunities and how we've worked with these projects to get them to where they are today. So starting with BAN protocol, BAN was the project that we identified at a conference more than a year ago. And this was obviously when DeFi was starting to grow, but had not sort of captured the mainstream imagination. And obviously the leader in the space is Chainlink, also a project that we invested in quite early, but we felt that with the growth in DeFi accelerating and our vision of how DeFi is going to scale, we realized that in order for the system to grow and for all the needs of the various ecosystem players to be met, there would be a need for multiple Oracle providers. And so we met with the founders of BAN protocol, and we're quite impressed with the technical knowledge of the founders and what they were looking to build. And so we eventually invested in them. And since investing in them, we have worked very closely with the project to introduce them to potential partners who would use the Oracle solution because they were a relatively new player in the field. We've also made introductions to investors who perhaps were less aware of BAN's existence. And then we've also organized various podcasts and AMAs with the team to create awareness of the protocol in general. And then last but not least, we've also participated actively in staking on the network to provide data validation. So this has been a pretty good investment for us, and we continue to hold BAN protocol tokens and continue to work closely with the project to help them scale. And the next project I wanted to talk about is Synthetics, obviously a name that everyone is very familiar with. The logo here is a little bit outdated, pardon my omission here. But yeah, we've known the founders of Synthetics, Kane and his team, for quite a while. Synthetics launched in early 2008, initially as a project called Heaven, which is a decentralized stablecoin project. And we looked at the project, but we were unconvinced at the time about the stablecoin idea. But we continued to stay in touch with the team, and in November 2018, when they pivoted to create Synthetics, we took a closer interest in them and continued to follow them, and we started to see signs of early user traction on the platform in mid-2019. So as things started to take off, we started to build a position in Synthetics. We like their model of creating an infinite liquidity pool, and also we liked the way that they designed the token such that the staking yields would vest over time as opposed to being vested immediately. And so seeing how undervalued Synthetics was, we, as I mentioned, we took a position in the token. And since then, we've had a regular dialogue with the team. Oh, not to mention as well, we were also very impressed with the team's very clear vision of what its growth roadmap would be. And in addition to that, also how quickly they were able to execute and roll out new products. So we invested in Synthetics in late 2019. And as I mentioned, we have been active on the network through staking on the network and minting assets. We have introduced the team to other exchanges, as well as to investors, and we have engaged with them on a regular dialogue about their token economic design. So again, this has been an exciting journey for us and one of our early investments. And then to touch on one of the newer investments, which we participated in only 2 months ago, is Alpha Finance. So the Alpha Finance team was referred to us through our relationship with the team at Band Protocol. And we were initially skeptical about the team's knowledge and ability when it came to DeFi. But having spoken to Tasha and her team, having had the first conversation with them, it became very apparent to us that they were technically very strong and their knowledge of DeFi markets was very deep. And it was also good to see that they were constantly thinking about how to address certain gaps in the marketplace. And so in late September, with the DeFi prices correcting and yields falling sharply, we recognized the need and the potential for leverage use strategies to draw more users into DeFi. And hence we agreed to invest in Alpha Finance. And we believe that the team's execution ability as well as their collaborative spirit would enable them to scale and innovate very quickly. So during this short journey that we've had with them, we have provided feedback on the product design every step of the way. We've introduced them again to other DeFi projects. We have organized marketing events with them, provided liquidity on Alpha Homora, as well as introduced investors. And again, this success that we have had with other projects have also replicated with Alpha Finance. So that's a quick sort of introduction to some of the investments we've made and how we've gone about making them and what are some of the considerations that we have made. So we continue to be very passionate and very strong advocates for DeFi. And with the new fund launching in a couple of weeks, we will be making more concerted investments into this front. And our team is based out in Asia, but we invest globally. And through the network of funds that we talk to on a regular basis and share deals with, we're able to access these early stage deals in different parts of the world. But importantly as well, because so much of the DeFi activity happens in Asia, and the appetite is continuing to grow in this part of the world, we are also very well positioned to identify these DeFi projects, names such as Band Protocol, Synthetics, and Alpha Finance, all of which were born in Asia, and to be able to reciprocate and refer these deals to our network of partners globally. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions from the audience if there's any. So we have a couple of questions coming through. So the first question is, what's the next area Spartan wants to invest in, specifically in DeFi? I think within DeFi, we still see many different opportunities. For instance, there's currently no yield curve in DeFi. And obviously for credit products to develop further, we need a yield curve. And so we're looking at various projects in this area. That's one example. The second example is that at the moment within DeFi, we have a lot of lending protocols. And I mentioned the introduction of leveraged lending as well with Alpha Finance. But most of the lending that happens today is collateralized lending. And the collateral levels range from anywhere between 150% to, in some cases, more than 500%. Clearly, that is not an efficient use of capital. And in order for lending to expand more and scale, we need to be able to use the capital more efficiently. So we believe that we will eventually see under-collateralized lending or even uncollateralized lending evolve. So there are various different projects that are innovating in this area, and we have invested in one of them. And then, of course, there are other things as well. For instance, there are more insurance protocols that are coming that uses different models in terms of either their claim process or differentiating in terms of how they achieve lower premiums to be able to attract more people to take up insurance. And that is a space that's evolving quite quickly. The next question is whether we see any different characteristics or capabilities in entrepreneurs in Asia versus other parts of the world. I would say that the answer is probably no. I think that good entrepreneurs can be found anywhere, and I think DeFi started mainly with projects in the West, and I think the developer talent in the West at the moment is probably more abundant than in Asia, although that is also that has changed also quite a bit over the last 10 years with Asia sort of developing its own talent pool. And I think one of the benefits of working with projects in Asia is that generally, I think there's less deal competition in Asia, and hence, we are able to identify and get into some of these deals earlier. And secondly, I think the Asian DeFi market is going to evolve very quickly, and perhaps the adoption will come more quickly than even the US and Europe. And that's partly a function of the demographics in Asia, being a younger sort of population base and a larger population base. And then secondly, also because I think the regulatory environment in Asia is generally more favorable than, say, in the US, right? So that allows entrepreneurs to innovate more quickly without concern about sort of the regulators sort of coming after them. And that generally sort of makes it easier in terms of innovation, the speed to innovation, right? And so so we're fortunate to have been able to find some good entrepreneurs in this part of the world who are very passionate about DeFi and have their ideas about how things how they want things to evolve. Okay, the next question here is for public investors who don't have a chance to participate in private rounds. how can we get in on good investing opportunities? Yeah, I think that's a good question. That is, I would say, not entirely true. Obviously, for investors, I mean, there are exchanges like FTX and Binance that allow investors to participate in some of these opportunities through their respective programs. So for instance, the Launchpad and the Launch Pool obviously allows Binance's users to be able to participate in these offerings before they go public. And if you have observed how some of these tokens perform immediately after listing, you would have noticed that in the immediate aftermath of the listing, these asset prices do appreciate quite significantly. Now, for other investors that want to participate, but of course there's a cap or limit to how large an amount you can invest, and generally they tend to be only a few $1,000s. Now, for larger investors that want to participate in these private opportunities, I think the easiest way to do it would be to invest in an early stage venture fund that focuses on DeFi. So as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of launching a fund ourselves, and our partners around the world also have their respective funds. So that's where I'll go. Okay, the next question, and probably the last one we'll take here is, where do you see Alpha Finance and Band Protocol going in terms of market cap, non-diluted in the mid to long term? Well, first of all, I think we're still in the very early days of DeFi, as illustrated by the market cap comparison I showed earlier between DeFi, FinTech, and traditional finance. So I think there is a lot of scope and room to grow for all of the protocols involved, right? I think we're literally just scratching the surface, if we think about how many users there are in DeFi currently. So I think there's lots of opportunities, not just for Band Protocol and Alpha, but literally for the entire sector. So I wouldn't discount sort of many of these protocols, particularly the ones that manage to attract usage and real adoption, going up multiple times from the current levels. So I think that's all the time we have today. It's been a pleasure sort of speaking at this webinar, and yeah, I look forward to an opportunity to interact with some of you. If you need to contact me, my email information is available, or you can reach out to the SCB team for my contact information. Thank you.